At this year's CES event, Nvidia announced a new version of its AI-powered graphics technology suite, DLSS 4.5, sporting updates to DLSS super resolution and multi-frame generation. While the latter won't make an appearance until the spring, you can use the new upscaler right now. The AI transformer model that Nvidia introduced with DLSS 4 has been improved to reduce the amount of ghosting and flickering seen in upscaled frames, thanks to better training from a larger dataset and a lot more calculations behind the scenes. That does mean that DLSS 4.5 will push your GPU a fair bit harder, especially if it's a first or second generation RTX chip, which don't have the same hardware capabilities as Blackwell or Ada Lovelace processors. To use DLSS 4.5 in games, you need to download and install the 591.74 GeForce Game Ready drivers, as well as the most recent version of the Nvidia app. DLSS 4.5 has to be enabled on a per-game basis, so head to the graphics section in the Nvidia app, find the game you want to use DLSS 4.5 in, and then scroll all the way down to driver settings. Select DLSS Override Model Preset, then click on Recommended in the row of options at the top. This will force the game to use the new upscaling model instead of whatever it was originally programmed to use. Now just fire up the game and enjoy the improved upscaling. But wait, there's more! If you click on Custom instead of Recommended, you can choose a specific preset for DLSS to use, instead of letting the software use the default selection. Each preset tweaks how DLSS works, sometimes making it a little harder to run, but giving you better results. While there's a big list of them, most are no longer used. Preset K is the default one enabled when you enable DLAA, DLSS Quality, or DLSS Balanced in a game. With DLSS 4.5, Nvidia has introduced two new presets, L and M. L is optimized to work best at 4K resolution, and with DLSS Ultra Performance, whereas preset M is for any resolution, but specifically for DLSS performance. To see what DLSS 4.5 is bringing to the table, we've compared it to DLSS 4 in a bunch of different games, testing them at 1080p with an RTX 3060 Ti graphics card and at 4K with an RTX 5090, both using DLSS Performance and DLSS Ultra Performance. First up is Cyberpunk 2077, a game that's usually first in line to support Nvidia's latest graphics technologies. We've set the graphics quality to the highest settings, including the use of path tracing. DLSS ray reconstruction has been disabled because that system uses its own upscaler that doesn't use the new transformer model, and it will just override whatever you select in the Nvidia app. Starting with 4K performance mode and preset or model M with an RTX 5090, you'll notice, or perhaps not notice, that there isn't a massive difference between DLSS 4 and DLSS 4.5 in this game. However, look carefully at the performance figures in the top left-hand corner. The increased complexity of the new transformer model in DLSS 4.5 works the GPU harder than DLSS 4 does, so the average and 1% low frame rates are both down. The GPU's power consumption is also slightly up. That might seem like bad news, but if you watch things carefully, you can see where the new upscaler is better. Distant edges shimmer less, and thin lines such as barbed wire on a fence are more stable. Sticking with 4K but changing the upscaling mode to Ultra Performance with preset L, we see a similar result as from before. There's a bigger performance drop and a higher power consumption, but the overall quality of the visuals is better. Look at the background characters in the bar. Their bodies are more defined, and colours stand out more. There's also far less flickering of edges, which you can see as the camera travels down the alley. Now let's see how Cyberpunk 2077 runs and looks on an RTX 3060 Ti at 1080p. We're still maxed on the graphics settings, so DLSS has got its work cut out. Once again, there isn't a huge difference in performance mode, though DLSS 4.5 is generally a little better. Characters in the bar look more defined, though there's quite a bit of flickering going on once we head outside, and especially near the road. However, with Ultra Performance mode and preset L, the differences between DLSS 4 and 4.5 are more pronounced. There's a small hit to the frame rates as well as a bump to the power consumption, but the RTX 3060 Ti is producing a cleaner and more stable output. There's much less random flickering going on, and the detail of objects is sharper. It's not perfect, but given the GPU is rendering at just 360p, the results of both DLSS models are pretty impressive. The next game we tested is Black Myth Wukong, and just as with Cyberpunk 2077, we cranked up the graphics settings to use full ray tracing, aka path tracing. We'll start again at 4K on an RTX 5090, with performance mode and preset M. One of the reasons we chose to test Black Myth Wukong is that the game tends to produce an overly sharp image by default. This matters because DLSS is trained to favour sharpness when generating its output, and in the case of DLSS 4.5 and this game, it's actually too sharp. There is a slider in the game's graphics menu that you can use to reduce the sharpness, but unless you knock it all the way down, it always stands out a bit. It's especially noticeable when you use Ultra Performance mode and preset L. Look how badly the leaves on the background trees flicker as the camera passes underneath the bridge. It's not all bad news though, as Black Myth Wukong looks less washed out with DLSS 4.5, and if you check out the foliage near the end of the benchmark run, you'll see that the leaves and the needles look fuller and with better definition. At 1080p on the RTX 3060 Ti, it's the same story again. With DLSS 4.5, the game is a bit too sharp, though there is less flickering on long, thin objects. Tree branches that can be seen with the sky directly behind them shimmer quite badly in DLSS 4, but not so in DLSS 4.5. The new upscaler is also better in Ultra Performance mode, with preset L. There's less shimmering and flickering all around. For our next game, Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl, we've just focused on DLSS performance mode. If you game at 1440p or 1080p, that's really the lowest quality of upscaler you should be using, as Ultra Performance takes away too much fine detail in this game. As Stalker 2 doesn't have a built-in benchmark, the comparison runs aren't like for like, but they're close enough to see the benefits that DLSS 4.5 brings to the table. At 4K with the RTX 5090, there's really nothing that stands out between the two DLSS versions, but if you look carefully at the telephone cables, you'll see that the second generation transformer model helps to make them look less pixelated. Leaves and branches on trees have more definition with DLSS 4.5, just as they do in Black Myth Wukong. And while the GPU is clearly being worked harder, there's not enough of a performance drop to worry about. However, that's not the case with the RTX 3060 Ti at 1080p, as the 1% frame rate takes quite a beating, but at least there's less flickering on barbed wire, cables, and trees. Some games show almost no discernible difference between DLSS 4 and 4.5. Doom the Dark Ages, Spider-Man Remastered, and Baldur's Gate 3 all look virtually the same, regardless of which transformer model is used. You need to look very closely at these games to spot where DLSS 4.5 is better. For example, in Spider-Man, the new upscaler handles the wire mesh of gates better. In DLSS 4, these can flicker slightly depending on the camera angle, but it's far less apparent in DLSS 4.5. In actual gameplay though, you're unlikely to notice such differences because you'll be too busy swinging around or blasting demons. What you might just notice is the drop in performance when using DLSS 4.5, especially if it was already borderline with the previous version of DLSS. So, what to make of Nvidia's latest version of DLSS? The visual output is arguably better, but not massively so, and it heavily depends on what game you use it in. When it comes to objects and lines flickering about, and pixels shimmering on edges, these have all been reduced, though DLSS's fondness for sharpening images is now more apparent. The complexity of the new transformer model means the increased GPU workload will affect your frame rates and generate more heat. If you have an older RTX card like a 20 or 30 series, you might find DLSS 4.5 is a bit too hard work for your GPU, though our RTX 3060 Ti seem to cope for the most part. On the whole though, DLSS 4.5 gets a thumbs up, and for one simple reason. The choice about using it is entirely in your hands. If the pros outweigh the cons in your favourite games, then, provided they already support DLSS upscaling, switching to the new transformer model is very straightforward. At least you won't have to buy another graphics card if you want to use Nvidia's new AI-powered upscaler. Thanks for watching, and for the latest on all things PC gaming, subscribe to PC Gamer.